It is an honor for me to chair this session on the urban redevelopment in India. I'm architect Anil Kumar Hatkar, the managing director of Arcades, an architecture firm established by me over 40 years ago. I'm currently conferred with the post of Assistant Vice President Pacific Rim from Lambda Alpha International, an honorary society for the advancement of land economics. Today, we have Gautam Chatterjee of MHADA, that is Maharashtra Housing and Area Development Authority, who is also the officer on special duty for the Dharavi redevelopment project, and will be speaking on the primacy of stakeholders in urban redevelopment.
Thank you, Mr. Hatkar, chairperson of the session today. My fellow speakers, Abis and Mr. Sen Kapadia, and distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. While Mr. Rizvi just took you along an issue of integration as one of the basic points for sustainability in any redevelopment project that we talk about in the urban context, I would like to take you a little further, where the communities who in fact he talked about being involved in the various decision-making processes that take place in any redevelopment, I would try to take you along the path a little further to see whether we are prepared to accept the community, the occupants of any brownfield project, to be our partners. I'll briefly start off with the background in which we are talking. In the Indian context, we have this very fast pace of mostly unplanned urbanization, which in the morning plenary session Mayank mentioned as the solutions are always eluding the problems which are moving much faster. And therefore, most of the urbanization in the country is turning out to be unplanned. So while on the one hand we have proliferation of slums, which in fact you would find in all the small medium towns to the metropolises, where Mumbai excels in 54% of the population being residing in these unplanned informal settlements, to other metropolises like Kolkata and Delhi, where it may be ranging from 30 to 40%, and is a scenario in every small and medium town which is going through this urbanization process. This is the scenario on one side in the cities of India. The other is the issue of urban decay, because cities are growing old, and the island city of Mumbai, if we take up what was mentioned in the morning session, close to 20 to 30,000 buildings which have outlived their lives, have been there for more than 60 years, and are in a state of dilapidation. We have inadequacy of urban infrastructure. Infrastructure is not able to cope with the existing issues that are there. Even the redevelopment that is taking place, where we have roped in the market forces in a big way for all the redevelopment schemes, be it slum redevelopment or urban renewal, the extent of infrastructure that is required to sustain the type of densification that we are doing, we have a feeling that we are lagging there. There's a huge shortage of affordable housing because cities cannot be a static situation. Cities are growing. Urbanization is taking place. It's very fast. Maharashtra, this state, is one of the most urbanized states in the country. Close to 40% of the population stay in urban areas. And maybe in next 10 years down the decade, we'll have majority of the population staying in the small, medium towns and the other urban areas. Now, if the pace of urbanization, what we have seen in the past, has resulted in majority of the people not being able to get an affordable housing and finding a solution in an informal settlement, that situation is not going to change even in this dynamic process of urbanization. Therefore, the need to create large affordable housing to keep with the future needs of affordable housing. We have a situation where The country's GDP mainly is coming from the cities, the urban areas, but the city governments are poor. So we have rich cities, but poor city governments. We have problem of weak governance. I'm a party to that because I come from government. We have lack of competent staff and capacity when it comes to dealing with the problems of these urbanization, infrastructure, housing, and all the other related issues, more so in the small and medium towns. And the issue which, in fact, I'm going to highlight in today's presentation is the lack of representative voice of the urban poor communities, certain things which was hinted upon by ABIS as to when we plan, when we take up a brownfield project, do we take into account the people who are residing there also can have a say and also can make a difference in the way we plan and when we take it forward. This background leads us to the present context in which we are, which I sort of term as a jigsaw puzzle of 3 A's: affordability, availability, and acceptability. If I just run you through how these 3 A's are just not willing to come together, leading us to this sort of an elusive jigsaw puzzle being completed, is that we have affordable and available housing stock, what I call as the slum housing, which are affordable. Therefore, the poor have been able to find the solution of the housing in those settlements. They are available in plenty, depending on the pocket the money that you have in your pocket. If you want to go in the distant suburb, you'll be able to afford a slum which is cheaper. If you want to get it in the inner city area, it'll be costlier. But it is not acceptable to us. It has led us to all cities as divided cities, which does not believe in inclusiveness, which talks about a city being a legal city and an illegal city. In Mumbai, it's a peculiar situation where we say that the illegal city is 54%. Do we need to go back and look at the laws that we have created, where the majority of the people then become the lawbreakers? Do we need to go and see whatever acceptable standards we have set, our planners, we bureaucrats have set, is that the correct way to go about? So, affordable, available stock in the housing, in slums are there, but they are not acceptable to us. We have the second scenario where we have available and acceptable housing stock. It is said that in Mumbai, close to 100,000 flats would be available and acceptable because the building permission department of the municipal corporation would have approved that building stock, but are not affordable. So they lie under lock and key, but people cannot afford them. And the third scenario, we have acceptable and affordable housing stock so little that they are just not available. To give an example of what Mahada does, Mahada just now, in fact, we are in the process of selling, marketing our 3,000 odd flats that we have, which we feel are affordable. But since they are affordable, for those 3,000 flats, there are 3.5 lakh applicants, 350,000 applicants trying to get those 3,000 houses, which will go through a lottery process, and the ones who are lucky will get it. So this is the scenario where the 2 A's are coming together, but we are trying to struggle to see whether we can bring all the 3 A's together to complete the jigsaw puzzle. If I take you through the journey of how the slums got created and what has been the response of the government towards looking at these illegal, unauthorized settlements, it started off with, of course, eviction. The mindset of eviction and clearance still exists in some of the minds of people like us who are mostly residents of the legal city, which came out also in one of the questions in the morning session where we say, why can't we throw out these slum dwellers? Where Mr. Ratnakar Gaikwad did mention that we need them more than they need us because they are the providers of the services to the city. They keep the city costs down. And all of us are used to going to these hawkers to buy our stuff, the vegetable vendor and whatever, or getting their services in their homes in the form of the maids, the drivers, and various other things without thinking as to where do they reside. So we do look upon these slums as eyesore, but forget that eyesore, though we look at as a problem, is actually a solution that has been found by them, which we in the government could not provide. So the eviction gave rise to tolerance. We tolerated these structures. Maharashtra was quite progressive in coming out with a statutory provision in 1971 to say that these are people who need to be tolerated, and therefore, for a basic human living, they need to be provided amenities. So basic amenities were provided to them. We moved ahead, they were provided photo passes. We said, these are protected structures. So therefore, we will not shift you out of this unless it is required by the city for some projects, and if at all you are required to be shifted, you will be given an alternate accommodation. Also, there was a thinking that they need to be pushed to the periphery of the cities. So attempts were also made for relocating them outside to the periphery of the cities, forgetting that the reason that they are there in a particular place is because there is a symbiotic relationship between their living and their working. So working spaces are close by and therefore they are there. So if you push them out, they will actually come back, and that's what happened. We moved on in our progressive thinking to what was explained by Abis as how we felt that in situ redevelopment is the way ahead. And therefore, we took on, first to start with, it was started in the PMGP, and then presently we have the slum rehabilitation scheme, which basically draws upon the market to cross-subsidize and provide housing free to the people. In this, the government, in the various guidelines and the rules, regulations that have been framed, does say that there is a need for the community that is residing to participate in the whole process. However, in most of the cases we have found, though we have a developer here who sincerely believes that the community's participation should not be mere lip service, but they need to be actually involved in various decisions which affect their lives, mainly post-occupation. I feel we should go a step further to see whether the community can be made our partners in this process of redevelopment. The current approach is, of course, brownfield development of slums, also the inner city areas. Basically, wherever they are, let's densify, let's cross-subsidize by using market and try and see whether these redevelopments can take place. So, brownfield development of slums and their integration into the main city. So we are trying to obliterate this distinction of a legal and an illegal city to say that can we treat them as part of the city itself. Urban renewal of the inner city areas, which was the topic in the morning. We also are trying to see whether the government of India is coming out with a very comprehensive Rajiv Awas Yojana, which talks about also the need for how the cities, when they grow, we can have projects which will create affordable housing stock so that we can arrest the further growth of slums. And one of the attempts is, of course, the rental housing, which Mr. Gaikwad spoke about in the morning. In the current approach, we also have, as I mentioned, in our slum rehabilitation scheme and various other schemes, we talk about the involvement of community-based organizations, non-governmental organizations in participatory planning and including them in the various decision-making processes. However, there are gaps in the current thinking, in the current approach. One, of course, that when we talk about slum redevelopment or when we talk about the inner city area redevelopment, we have been talking about projects which are only that plot or that cluster specific. We have lacked the citywide approach in thinking that how, over a period of time, we can convert the city, whether it is renewal of the city or whether it is integrating the informal sector into the city network. We have not planned with a vision that over the next 5 or 10 years, we are going to actually convert the city in this manner. Something that we saw in the morning, as far as the inner city redevelopment is concerned, as to how all the 9 wards of the inner city area has to be divided into, say, 100-odd clusters, and how we can have that integrated planning ready, and maybe implementation can take place. Now, that is one way ahead, which we can bridge this gap, as I mentioned, as lack of comprehensiveness, lack of sustainability. Our present approach in the Maharashtra government is that all such brownfield areas, slums, the areas which are subject to urban decay, even the colonies created by Mahada some 30, 40 years back, they need to be redeveloped by using the market force in a manner that all such redeveloped or rehabilitation tenements that will get generated will go free of cost to them. If I do a simple back of the hand calculation, we say 54% are slums in Mumbai. We say close to 25% are the inner city areas, these 30,000 buildings. We say another 10% will be areas which MHADA has created in the 50s and 60s. We also said there are dilapidated buildings which are becoming dilapidated in the suburban areas. Have we added up to 90%? Are we saying that the 90% of the housing stock in the city is going to cross-subsidize by 10% of the remaining? I think there is some problem in this sustainability. And we need to relook at that, whether we can sustain the free housing that we have been talking about, and to what extent we can take it. Even the morning example of ROMF, to say that yes, it's quite hunky-dory, all these 30,000 buildings can get redeveloped. We would really like to go into the calculation as to how much of finance needs to be generated by the market and whether Mumbai has that absorption capacity to buy up all the free sale stock that will go in, which is going to cross-subsidize the scheme. And third is that although we talk about participation of the communities, there is a tendency always to treat the community, the occupants, whether it is the urban renewal areas or the slum areas, as beneficiaries. We say beneficiaries because we say we are giving them a free housing. So you are getting a free housing, so you get this benefit from us, so we treat you as beneficiaries. So if I give you a good house, maybe in the 17th floor, why should you crib? You have been staying in a squalor, in a shanty. I don't think that's the correct approach of looking at the community. I say it is not the occupants who are the beneficiaries, but it is the city which is the beneficiary. Why? In fact, he missed out when he said that this 52%, 54% of the slum dwellers are occupying 40% of the land space. I'm sorry, it is not so. They occupy only 6% of the land space. And in our slum redevelopment, what are we doing? We are further pushing them into 3% of the land space. Because in a slum redevelopment, we actually push them into vertical structures on 50 or 40% of the land. And who is the beneficiary? The city. Because that remaining land which gets cleared comes back to the city. So it's not them who are the beneficiaries, it is us who are the beneficiaries. And therefore, the need for us to change this mindset and not talk about them as beneficiaries. So the way forward, let's have a whole city approach, a city-wide approach to dealing with these problems of urbanization. I'm talking about housing. Of course, this also includes the infrastructure. So then only we can talk about slum-free cities. We can talk about urban renewed cities. Integrated cluster development of urban areas, what we have been talking about, is certainly the way forward. Inclusionary zoning is another thing which is going to take care of the growth of the cities. We need to say that whenever the city expands, how do we tackle the problem? Maybe we create new townships. We actually densify the inner city areas, which we are doing, that is through brownfield projects. And certainly the third way ahead is the greenfield projects in the areas which are going to expand, the cities are going to expand. Every development, every layout needs to have a component which is meant for the urban poor. If we do not do that, we will continue to have these people moving into the city and also finding their way into the slum. And therefore, coming back to that issue of sustainability, I feel time has come when we actually go back to the communities and put them into the habit of making micro savings. They should get into the habit of savings, and when we tell them that you are partners in the process, your equity participation is not only in the form of the land that you are occupying, your equity participation is also going to the small savings that you will do. You should also contribute maybe 10%, 20%, or whatever is affordable to you in the whole process of redevelopment. That would make them feel also that they are partners in the process. We will also treat them as equal partners in the process. Some of the issues that I have brought out when we treat them as partners in the process, that we have to actually arrange meetings of the networks that are formed. There are already in these informal settlements or also in the tenanted buildings that we talk about in urban renewal, there are also already social groups which are the Ganesh Mandals or other Bal Krida Mandal or the Women's Mandal. So they are already organized along the youth lines, along the women's lines, the business community lines. We need to tap into those strengths. As someone said in the morning, we should get away when we are talking about redevelopment, that is brownfield project, this tendency of sweeping it, clearing it, thinking that it's become a virgin land and superimposing a greenfield concept onto a brownfield development. That's not going to happen. When we talk about brownfield development, we have to think that brownfield development is different from greenfield projects. And in brownfield development, we need to keep in mind that there are existing strengths in whatever communities have created, whether it is a slum community or any other community. We need to develop those strengths. If there is an existing pavement, a walkway, existing road, we need to see how that can be expanded. If there's an existing playground, we need to see how that can be expanded fivefold to cater to the other developments and densification in the area. Organizing survey with the community representatives. We can be thinking that we are the best surveyors because we have the degree to know as to how a survey should be done. We can be the best planners, but I feel that the people also know how, because their domain knowledge is much better than what we have. So can we, at all these stages of implementation, survey documentation, planning, designing, implementation, and post-occupation, in all these 4 stages, can we take them along and say that they are also decision makers in this process? As I mentioned, supporting community, collecting savings, establishing joint committees to oversee implementation, where they are also there, strengthening local groups and building collective management skills for post-implementation. This is very important because the lifestyle is changing from a present type of a high-density, low-rise shanty structures. We are putting them into tall vertical buildings. How do they manage that? The education part that he talked about, we need to actually go through that right from the beginning of the process, and this whole process of redevelopment should keep them always with us. Brings me to the final slide of my presentation, that we have always been talking about PPP. Can we move on to a concept of P to the power 4, where people also get joined in those 3 Ps, and it is no longer merely public-private partnership, but it is people, public, private partnership. Thank you.